If you can call the minutes, please, or call the roll call, please.
Alderperson Hoggett.
Here.
Alderperson Wyland.
Here.
Alderperson Yakub.
Here. Do we have a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Minutes approved. All right. On to number 3, parking. Consider parking restrictions on Fillmore Street and at 12th Street. Marty, you received a request from the school, I believe?
Yes, I did receive a letter from the principal up at the high school, Laura Love, expressing her concerns that she has, as well as those that she's gotten from students and parents and faculty in regards to parking on the north side of Fillmore Street between 12th and I believe it's 11th Street. Her concerns, if you take a look at the letter, is that the kids are walking in the street during the, especially during the wintertime. I think that's what she's going for here, is in the wintertime with the roadway narrowing because due to snow and slippery conditions and vehicles going up and down, with kids having to walk in the street because of not being a sidewalk there. She was looking to see if the city would be willing to restrict parking in that area during the winter months to try to help alleviate that problem.
I just drove up there. It is residential parking only on the north side, on the east side.
Right, we did.
There's no north side.
On
Fillmore.
On Fillmore.
Downhill.
Yeah,
Okay, I'm thinking 12th. Yeah, 12th, we've
Right.
got residential
No,
parking only.
The last meeting, we made those adjustments to 12th Street. Those are in. And then we put the sign in that says no parking from here to corner. That's in. I drove by there today. The kids that are parking there are obviously obeying it because we haven't had any issues.
Right.
So, I know this came up after our last meeting, so.
Right.
So basically, we want to extend it from, instead of from here to corner, we're just going to, she wants us to go all the way down.
Well, it's
Or
either
put
that.
residential parking.
That or, well, not residential parking, but maybe make it no parking during the winter months or make it no parking at all the way down.
Why wouldn't we make it residential parking only?
Well, no, I'm not saying residential parking. What I'm saying is no parking during the winter months, period.
Right,
Right.
because the kids can't walk by the cars.
like we
It's
have
a
on-
safety issue.
Yeah.
Right,
But right now, the problem is the number of cars that are parking there, which are all high school kids parking there.
Right.
So if you make it residential parking only, the residents can still use it and there'll be less cars.
that's my point.
Well, that's true. And then it would be,
Her problem is the high school kids using it, not the people who live there.
no, I think her problem is the vehicles there, no matter who it belongs to.
Right.
I think, especially during the winter months, that's what she's trying to get to. That and the lighting in the area as well.
And she's worried about the kids walking up that hill with vehicles there. But if that whole area is residential parking only, where will the kids be parking in that area?
Well, then they'd have to move somewhere else.
Right, so there will be no more kids
Correct.
going up that hill.
They do walk up that way because that's the back way into the high school.
Right,
so-
but if they can't park there anymore, they won't be walking up that way.
There are
All the
kids that
walkers
live in
from
that
downtown.
neighborhood.
Everybody downtown.
Residential.
Yeah, they don't bus them up. Everyone from downtown walks up.
Okay.
And a lot of them come up 12th Street or up Vine Street to get to the high school.
Okay.
Or walk
12th
straight
Street,
up
but
Fillmore.
Fillmore? Yeah, I suppose
I mean,
Fillmore
up
too.
Fillmore.
Yeah.
Fillmore, there's a trail right on the end of Fillmore.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, whatever. Either way, it doesn't bother me if there's a safety concern.
We could just do it like we do on Vine Street, where from November 15th to March 15th, it's just no parking, or, I don't
Well,
know.
that's what I'm wondering is how many residents that's going to impact, because that's a fairly narrow street, it's older housing there, and I'm not sure what they have for driveways.
Well,
I
and
didn't look
and
at
I
that close.
think if we just did it from, where we just put that new signage in on Fillmore Street, where no parking from here to corner, down to 11th Street, I think you eliminate the problem. Just that one block area, and there is no driveways there. The only, is it the Fire Risings or the
Freelanders?
Fearlanders that live on there? They're the only ones that have property mostly on that corner. There is no driveways on Fillmore
Right.
Street right there.
That's the one, okay,
Right.
I know where that is, all right.
So you want it to be no parking
I would
all
just
year
say-
round, or no parking just in the winter months?
Well, it just depends. Whatever we do for no parking, if we just did it down to 11th Street, I think that would eliminate the problem.
Of course, that's where the hill is anyways. Then
Yeah.
it flattens.
It starts to level
Well,
out.
yeah, it doesn't flatten, but.
Well, the only real problem is in the wintertime. Summertime, we've never had an issue.
Is it November to March, the signs that we have around town, or November to April?
It was, I think it's November 15th through March 15th,
Yeah,
I believe, or
so.
something like
Yeah.
that. Isn't that what it says, Jim?
I wouldn't be surprised if that wouldn't help Tom as well, because that's got to be a steep hill to plow.
Yep,
Do you want to make
I
a
believe it
motion?
is.
Sure. Yeah, I'll make a motion. I move that we restrict parking on the north side of Fillmore from 11th to 12th Street from November 15th to March 15th, or make it no parking, I guess.
I'll second that. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Moving on.
There was one more issue that she had in the letter, and I think it might be addressed. I know that the city was looking at new lights.
Well,
Street lights.
I was went up there and looked at the position of that light. When the street went through, that light was positioned off the corner.
All right.
Now, there's no reason it couldn't be relocated north another 25 feet to light the intersection completely.
Right.
Is that, I don't think we can discuss that right now, though, because it's not on the agenda. Just the parking was, not the lighting.
It says parking and lighting.
Not on the agenda,
Oh, I'm sorry.
just in her note, not on the agenda.
I got it.
So if we want to discuss that, it has to go on to the next meeting, please. Thank you. Okay. As I was saying, on to number 4, please. Consider ordinance change to prohibit hitting golf balls except in designated areas. Now, last we left this, Marty, you were going to check with the school to see what they felt?
I did. I talked to the superintendent and asked what the school district's position on this was. They felt the way it was being run now was fine. They didn't have any issues with citizens coming and using that open space for recreational purposes, even hitting golf balls. So they didn't have any plans to restrict people from using that.
Okay. Any thoughts, John?
I guess my question is, do we have jurisdiction over the school district? You know, I would not be in favor of people hitting golf balls in Lakefront Park, for example, or any other traveled park within the city of Hudson, because that would be dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's a golf ball. So I guess I don't know where our jurisdiction ends and where the school district has liability. If someone's hitting a golf ball in that area and it hits somebody, whose fault is it?
School district's liability, I believe.
It would be
But it's the person who hit the ball. It's
Right.
their fault.
right. It's their fault.
It's their fault, but it's the school district's liability.
So regardless
Still
of
be the
liability,
person-
injury still can occur because we know people are hitting golf balls at that location.
But the liability is on the person who hit the ball.
Correct.
I mean, otherwise you could say that, anyhow.
No, you're right.
Yeah, it's back to the person that, in any case, I mean, you trip somebody on the street, it's your fault, not the city's fault that you tripped them.
And so if I hit a golf ball and I hit somebody walking down there, and even though I yell 4 or whatever, and they get hit, then what happens? There's no
Get sued.
rules that govern that here. So you would consider a lawsuit to be the,
Well, it's the individual who caused the problem. They would be liable for their actions.
are there other precedents for activities in the city that we should or shouldn't be doing, or we prohibit? I guess, you see what I'm saying, I mean,
Well, I think it would be the same thing as if we have an ordinance against animals running at large. You have to have your dog on a leash. Well, if you're walking your dog on school property and your dog gets off leash and goes and bites somebody, well, the school district's not responsible, neither is the city. It's the owner that's responsible for it. So the city wouldn't pick up, I don't believe, any liability on it. If we did enact an ordinance, we would have jurisdiction over the school district since it was in the city limits.
okay. I guess that's what I wanted to know.
I move that we table it indefinitely.
Second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, moving on. Number 5, evaluate the stop sign on Crestview Drive and 11th and Hagan Street. Now, I had requested this a couple months ago. We wanted to wait to hear back from Foth, and I had talked to Dennis, and he sent us a manual, or a copy from the manual, the state manual, as to how yield signs and stop signs are used. This manual was redone and approved by the state in 2009, I believe. 2011. It was approved in 2009, and it was enacted, had to be adopted by 2011. So the manual on uniform traffic control devices is what I'm referring to. The manual states clearly that that corner should not have a stop sign, it should have a yield sign.
Really?
I double-checked what I read. I called them. I said, am I reading this correctly? And I was told yes. And I even asked them about number 7B, because That seemed to be the confusing statement to me, and I was told that that refers to a minor street such as an alleyway and a driveway, or a driveway. So, yeah, to me, it states clearly that it should be a yield sign. I suppose if you want to disagree with me, that's fine, but that's my opinion.
It does say yield signs may be installed if option C here. But even if the adjacent is a stop sign, a yield sign may be installed on the slip lane.
Except when you read number 7, it says a stop sign shall not be used in conjunction with any traffic control signal operation, except in either of the following cases.
Which 7? 07? 2B07?
That's the one I'm reading. That's the part I'm reading.
I thought you were reading the one you'd circled.
No,
here.
I'm not reading under yield sign. I'm reading under stop sign.
Oh, there it is.
Go to the standard section to number 7. And that was, part B is what I questioned, so I called Dennis to make sure I was understanding it properly, which apparently I was.
Because his last sentence in that letter he wrote you states, basically states a stop sign should not be. It says,
Yes.
basically either a yield sign or a standardized turning movement should be located at that location. A stop sign should not be.
Correct. And that's, I mean, you asked for Dennis to evaluate it. This is the answer we've gotten. So,
Well, let me go back to, that's interesting. I did want to fill you in on the reason we made that decision in 2008. And one alternative we discussed at the time but wasn't fundable. One of the things I'd asked to have done was a study done of the bridge to see if we could go to 4 lanes. That way the slip lane would have its own lane.
sure.
And you wouldn't even need you'd kind of need a yield sign for people crossing. And Denny is here, you can speak to this if you wanted to. But there was just barely enough room to go to 4 lanes. That was our original desire. But the problem is when trucks get to the other end, they can't turn. But when you go back to the original problem, the complaint from the neighbor was that, as he stated, when you come up, that slip lane curves so tightly that by the time you hit that curve, you're looking way back over your shoulder, and they're looking this way and not this way. And so the complaint here said, this is Jim Korski, the yield sign on the eastbound Crestview Lane at Hagan Street poses a hazard to other traffic drivers, typically because they typically do not yield. We know that people blow right through yield signs, at least they slow down at stop signs, especially westbound traffic to Crestview Drive trying to make a left turn onto Hagan Street. We did add more signage. We asked David, Sheldon Johnson to do a review at the time. We noted the traffic study reported that 11,800 vehicles travel westbound on Crestview, and we suggested the stop sign. Sergeant Atkinson at the time stated the volume of the traffic. We discussed the turn signals. Further discussion ensued regarding the turn signals, drivers' understanding of the right-of-way, timing of the signals. We changed some of the timing. Sergeant Atkinson stated that most of the accidents are rear-end collisions because people stopped to yield the right-of-way, but the driver behind them is trying to look over their shoulder to see if they have to stop, and they smack them in the rear. He stated the stop sign would require all drivers to stop and yield prior to proceeding the turn. Our discussions then, looking at the directions and the failure of people to yield at a yield sign, we came back and said it makes the most sense here if we cannot stripe it in 4 lanes, giving them their own lane. And Mr. Darnold was looking into funding back then, which was not available, to tell people, you know what, you're going to need to stop and pay attention to what's going around you instead of just blow through the yield sign and cut people off that are turning. That was the risk we were trying to solve at the time, and we felt that by stopping traffic, forcing them to look and then go was safer than blowing through the yield sign, which is the habit that people get into up there. They don't even pay attention to it.
I don't believe the yield sign or the stop sign are effective enough at that location due to the traffic volume. I believe that the only really good solution is a traffic control signal, a light. The yield sign, and I have traveled that as much as any other intersection in the city. That's one of my regular travel patterns, and yeah, the yield sign was basically no stopping. Stop sign slows you down, but neither one are still really helping that intersection function the way it should.
Okay,
So I think a light would be a better solution.
okay, so,
Let me say, and I still the light, and I still would like to, because of the sheer volume of traffic that comes around that corner, I would rather see a lane. You can come around, you have your own lane. That would make the most sense there versus either one of those, because you turn right into your own
Onto
lane.
the bridge, meaning
Yeah,
it
so
would
you'd
be.
have 2 lanes on that side of the bridge. I don't know if, if Denny had anything else, knew anything else after our last conversations on putting 2 lanes on there, other than what Mr. Sheldon had said.
Danny, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Well, I wasn't aware there was a public safety meeting till yesterday, so just my research on that intersection, Lee had called me previously, so I did some research on how right turns in that type of instance are handled. Typically, you have a larger radius with the cars turning right, 3 traffic into a dedicated lane. That's probably the safest way, because in that regards, you have more side swipe accidents than anything else. Typically, the first provision is the yield sign and then a stop sign. If you're going to regulate, at least my reading, if you're going to light the sign, then I think you also have to probably say that they cannot turn on red, on the red light. I would think so. I mean, I said I haven't watched traffic today. Maybe 1 out of 20 stop. The only ones that stop are the cars that are stopping because they look left, see the car going north on Hagen Street. Other than that, I'm not sure I saw a legal stop there the whole entire time. Their consideration is that you only have 1 lane currently. And if you're going to do anything, in my opinion, at that intersection, take a look at how that bridge can be redesigned as far as the traffic lanes if a new deck is put on it. Now, part of the issue with that area, the bridge is pretty short, so you have a short time, even if you have a dedicated right turn lane that you can move into, if you're turning left as you're going north, you got to weave. And you got a very short period of time to weave to get in that left lane. So regardless, you're going to be creating some form of traffic issue one way or the other.
Is that bridge?
But I guess what I'm saying is, if you're really going to evaluate that, you evaluate it within the context of how that bridge is going to be widened at some point with a new deck consideration, so that anything you do there can be incorporated into that design.
Is that bridge a DOT controlled?
Correct.
So it's up to the DOT whether or not the bridge gets widened. It's not up to the city.
Well, it's depending on the funding. If the city wanted to fund the entire thing, they'd probably go to DOT and say, we'll fund the entire improvement. But if you're going to ask for DOT assistance or some form of road assistance, then yes, they're going to have a say.
Okay.
They may have a say in design regardless, but with the funding, you might be, if the city funded it in its entirety, they may expedite cooperation.
Okay.
My observation at the last meeting was that we have a similar situation on the off-ramp from 94 going up to Carmichael at McDonald's there. And so we've got 2 right turn lanes and lights and a left turn lane. And that way, both those lanes can go right on red if nobody's there, because it's a one-way onto a one-way. And most people stop, wait when the traffic's there, they go. Otherwise, so they know they can stop and they know they can turn right on red. I know this is a 2-lane scenario, but the 1-lane scenario would be very similar, I think. So it seems like we kind of already have that situation going on. So my thought last time was, well, why don't we just put a light there that, governs that right turn at the same time. I guess people are a little more used to that, is kind of my thinking.
And it would be identical to what we have now, except that it'll only be red when the light, it would only be a stop, a red, when the other one was red. So it gives a little more synchronization.
Right.
The big problem with the light right now, and I don't necessarily disagree with you that probably ultimately there should be a light, is that we don't have the funding for a light right now.
How much is a light?
It's not about that, it's about, you have to rip up the street, you're gonna have to, I don't know how much the costs are, but I just know that we don't have the funding for it. It's not, we didn't budget for it. It's not in our budget. Public safety doesn't have a budget, so you're gonna have to look at Public Works probably, or, you know, I don't know where we would consider taking it from, but that's something that has to get looked into. But I'm not saying that we can't look into it. I'm saying that we don't have immediate funding at this time.
Okay.
So at this time, we have to consider what we're gonna do, if there's anything that we're gonna do immediately. And I understand what you're saying, Lee, and I read the minutes, and I see what you're saying, but this was also in 2008, and since then, there's been changes to the manual, and, you know, Denny just confirmed exactly what I said last meeting, that nobody stops at the stop sign. And I'm not gonna I don't think it's right to have a stop sign up, hoping that people will at least slow down enough to look to see what's going on. If there's a stop sign up, it needs to be obeyed. And if it's not being obeyed, then it's, I think, more of a hazard than a help. So I think that, you know, this is something that we should really consider a yield sign at this time. If we want to consider looking into funding and seeing how much it would cost to widen that lane and put it in a light, that's an option we can consider looking in the future on. And I think that's something that we'd have to ask Public Works to put on their agenda and see if they want to look into that.
So we put in a stop sign, we put in a law that says you will stop at this corner. People aren't following the law, which we put in place to make it a safer corner. They're just kind of treating it as they're really treating it as a yield sign, but when they had a yield sign, they were treating it as if there was no sign. So if we go back to a yield sign, we're back to where we started to begin with, and we've not solved any of the safety concerns that were brought up in 2008. Now we're just going back to we'll see what happens with letting traffic flow through there.
No, I don't agree with that.
Okay?
People have to obey the signs that we have up. They're not obeying a stop sign, which means you risk just as many accidents by not obeying a stop sign. You can get rear-ended by stopping at that stop sign very easily. Because if I choose to stop and the person behind me chooses not to, I'm getting rear-ended because they don't stop there. So that's why I don't agree with it. Plus, we have a manual that states clearly that it's not supposed to be a stop sign there. So I'll make a motion that we have a yield sign, that we replace that sign with a yield sign. And if we want to look into further studies on that, you know, if we want to, and we can check with Public Works to see if they want to have a study as to whether or not we put a street light there. Or, I mean, a stoplight.
I'll second that.
Okay, all those in favor? Aye. Opposed?
No?
Thanks, Denny.
Thank you, Denny. Sorry to put you on the spot there. Okay, on to number 6. Fire Department radio interoperability with Washington County agencies. Jim?
Yep, I didn't have any success in getting a fee reduced with Washington County. So therefore, they want $400 per radio per year, what they consider a maintenance fee to be on their system. I have the funding, but it's a matter of it'll be an ongoing fee, and I'd like to get 2 of them, so it'll be $800 a year.
Okay, you do have the funding?
Yeah.
And you have the funding for the radio purchase and for
The maintenance fee.
And of course, you would budget that in the
Right.
future as well. Marty, you were telling me about,
Well, for law enforcement, we don't have that issue. We have a system where they can cross-patch us onto their radio system. And I was just kind of curious if they could do that with your
Yeah,
frequency.
they do it to what used to be Blue or statewide fire, VLAW, something now. The difficulty is with a portable, because the Fireground or Blue or that channel is not a repeated channel on the VHF. We can't always hit the tower where we're at from a portable radio. From a mobile, generally, we don't have any problem, but from a portable radio, because the VHF channel's not repeated. If we can hit the tower, then we're okay, because then it does its thing to convert it to, you know, the
Cross
800
patch,
the cross patch.
Right.
The issue comes in is when we're in the building somewhere to be able to hit that tower.
Right.
Okay.
And how many times a year do you think you'll use it?
We go back and forth probably 10 or 15 times a year with the Washington County agencies.
Okay, so it'd be about $80 per time you use it.
Yeah.
You have the funding, it's something you really,
Why I really believe we need to do. Like I said, we've had an incident already where the cross patch got taken down while our guys were in the basement fighting fire.
that's not good.
We lost our communication link. I mean, it was an error on their part. We don't have that direct link to their system right now.
That's a safety issue at that
Yeah.
point, so
I'll move for approval.
I second.
All those in favor? Aye. All right. All right, EMS, Fire Department, Police Department updates. Do we want to start? We'll just keep along with you, Jim.
Yeah, coming up the holiday season, I want everybody to have a safe and a happy holiday. Dave's got some notes here for holiday safety, fire safety tips, and the 3 chiefs, police, fire, EMS, 4 chiefs actually, North Hudson as well, rang bells for the Salvation Army. We had a good time doing that. So.
And who won?
Everybody loves a firefighter.
Oh, yeah.
By $7, thank you.
Everybody loves a firefighter. You don't hand out tickets.
You got,
Yes, everybody won.
Yeah, everybody won.
you got lucky at the very end.
Do you have anything you want to?
Dave does.
I just, a couple, we are sending information to the Hudson Star Observer regarding holiday safety, but I would just like to say a few things. You cannot have a live Christmas tree in any kind of assembly occupancy. The code changed last year.
In any kind of what? I'm sorry.
Live Christmas tree in assembly occupancy. Assembly occupancies is where you assemble people.
Oh,
For example, in the council chambers here, well, you don't have any Christmas tree at all, but in the city hall, you don't have a live Christmas tree where it's fake. And the biggest problem we had a couple years ago when he did this, passed this law, because NFPA 1 says you can't have it, was like churches. And now most of the churches have gone with the artificial trees for good. But for those of you that just still haven't got to it or are still thinking about it, you cannot have it anymore. And of course, in your home, your live Christmas tree you can have. And make sure you always keep those things watered. Just don't put it up, forget to water it. You should water it almost every day, at least at the onset, because she'll dry out otherwise. And take it down. I mean, don't leave it in your house for 2 months, you know, after a couple weeks, take it down. So it does become a fire hazard because it dries out. And another quick thing for the holidays is candles. We have a few fires through the year where people leave their homes with candles burning. I have trouble figuring why they do that, but I guess it does happen. Make sure you extinguish all candles, especially after parties, and always, when you're at home, keep the candles in sturdy containers. A good thing I tell people every year to do this is that if you're having a party and you got candles lit, last person to bed, when you shut the lights off, take a little walk through the house. If you left a candle on, that will stick out like a sore thumb, and you can blow it out. A couple other things I get from Public Works I got here. City ordinance does state you cannot shovel, plow, or push snow out across city streets or into city streets. So plow drivers that do private lot stuff cannot plow across the street with the snow. And obviously the ordinance goes further, says you can't plow snow onto other people's property. So kind of a double-edged sword there. Just to let people know who are listening to this, you can't do that. If we get complaints, citations will be issued. That's all I got.
Alrighty.
Kind of dovetailing on to what Dave was saying, obviously last weekend we had our snowfall come in and people forgot how to drive in very slick conditions. We ended up having 12 accidents over the weekend, but 6 of them, of the 12, were within a 4-hour time period from 4 to 7 o'clock at night, or a 3-hour time period. So we encourage people when the roads get slick, drive safely, slow down. Majority of the accidents we had were people driving too fast. Now, that also brings us up to snowplow ordinances that we have in town. We started issuing citations for 24-hour vehicles. We ended up towing 4 vehicles here on Tuesday, or 5 vehicles for being set on the street longer than 24 hours. We have a couple ordinances in place. One is for a snow event, anything over 2 inches. You got to make sure that you're not on the city street until it's plowed curb to curb. You also have one for 24 hours. If your vehicle is sitting anywhere on any city street in one position longer than 24 hours, it will be ticketed and it could be towed. So we just want to encourage people to make sure you get your vehicles off the street so we can get them plowed. Otherwise, that's all I got.
I got
Anything else,
one
Dave?
other thing, too, regarding garbage cans. When you set them out, can be set out 24 hours before pickup day. When you take them back, please don't set them out in the streets. Driveways or boulevards is a good place to put them, because the plows come through, you're gonna lose your garbage can. They gotta go around and just makes a mess. So the garbage can should be on boulevards always and/or driveways, and then take them back after they are emptied by the hauler.
Okay.
And I think we got a piece to that too. Even when the snow piles up, you still need to put your receptacles on your own property.
Yep, that is correct too, yep.
Okay, informational items, I don't think we have anything else.
I think that's it.
All right, any items for future agenda? Lee, you have anything? John?
The intersection, it's the next one east of the high school, I can't remember, is that Spruce and Vine? It's not only extremely poorly lit now, but the crosswalk, I mean, I've almost hit somebody there, and so has my wife, when they were crossing, because it's really hard to see people. It's really a nighttime issue. They probably could be solved with the light, but we'd have to look at it.
Okay,
So, I guess that would be the one.
that's the one. Anything else? All right, do we have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.